Welcome. This is the ISO 14001 Executive Decision Brief, produced by Management Systems International. If you're watching this, you've been asked, or have chosen, to understand what ISO 14001 is and whether your organization should pursue it. This briefing is designed to give you exactly that, a clear, leadership-level understanding of what the standard requires, what it means for your organization, and what the next step looks like. Let's get into it. The first question any executive reasonably asks is, why now? The honest answer is that the landscape has shifted. Environmental performance used to be primarily a regulatory concern. Today, it's a business expectation. Organizations are facing pressure from four converging directions. First, ESG expectations. Customers and business partners are increasingly asking for evidence of environmental governance as a condition of doing business. Second, supply chain qualification. Environmental certification is becoming a requirement to bid on or maintain certain contracts. Third, regulatory scrutiny. Climate-related and environmental compliance obligations are growing across industries and geographies. And fourth, market credibility. Organizations that can demonstrate a structured approach to environmental responsibility are simply better positioned. The bottom line on this slide is important. ISO 14001 is increasingly becoming a market access requirement, not a discretionary initiative. Organizations that treat it as optional may find that decision made for them. Before going further, it's worth being clear about what this standard is and what it isn't, because there are common misconceptions that can derail a good decision. ISO 14001 is a management system standard. It is focused on governance, accountability, and continual improvement. It is designed to integrate with your existing business processes. That's what it is. What it is not. It is not a product mandate or a technology requirement. It is not a prescriptive environmental performance program that tells you exactly what your emissions need to be. And it is not an operational redesign of your business. Think of it this way. ISO 14001 gives you the framework to identify what your organization's environmental obligations and risks are and to manage them in a structured, auditable way. The framework is yours to define within your scope. The standard governs how you manage it, not what the outcome must look like numerically. Now, let's talk about what happens if an organization chooses to delay. There are four consistent risks that emerge for organizations that defer environmental system development. First, disqualification from customer opportunities, bids, or supply chain relationships where certification is required. Second, reactive ESG responses. When a customer or partner asks for environmental documentation and nothing is in place, the response is typically uncoordinated and expensive. Third, increased compliance and regulatory exposure. Organizations without a formal system are more likely to miss obligations or respond to incidents poorly. And fourth, the cost and disruption of a late adoption. Organizations that build systems under pressure consistently spend more and experience more disruption than those that implement on a planned timeline. The statement at the bottom of this slide is worth carrying. Planned implementation is consistently less disruptive than reactive compliance. Every organization that implements ISO 14001 eventually, and most do, wishes they had started sooner. For organizations that are already certified to ISO 9001, this slide is particularly relevant. ISO 14001 uses the same high-level structure and language as ISO 9001, what's known as the Annex SL, or high-level structure. That means leadership, Planning, audits, and management review are already shared processes. Your team already knows how to operate within a management system framework. In practical terms, ISO 14001 typically adds 2 to 3 system elements to an existing ISO 9001 framework, not a new infrastructure. You're building on what's already in place, not starting over. For organizations without existing ISO certification, the same path applies. The integration just begins with this standard, rather than building on an existing one. Executives often assume that implementing a management system standard means hiring new people, shutting down operations, or making significant capital investments. This slide addresses that directly. What ISO 14001 actually requires is executive sponsorship and leadership direction, cross-functional coordination, identification of your organization's environmental aspects and legal and regulatory obligations, and integration of the system into existing procedures and reviews. What it does not require: new departments, immediate capital investment, or operational shutdowns. The system is built around your organization as it already operates. The work is in documenting, structuring, and governing what you're already doing, and identifying where environmental risks and obligations need to be managed more formally. Let's step back from the compliance framing for a moment, because organizations that implement ISO 14001 tend to experience benefits that go well beyond avoiding risk. 4 outcomes show up consistently: proactive environmental risk management. Organizations with a formal system identify and address risks before they become incidents or liabilities. Stronger ESG credibility, with customers, investors, and stakeholders who are increasingly scrutinizing environmental performance. Improved operational discipline and visibility. A well-implemented EMS creates clarity about how environmental obligations are being managed across the organization. And long-term business resilience. Organizations that govern their environmental footprint strategically are better positioned as regulations tighten and customer expectations evolve. The closing thought on this slide is an important one for executives. ISO 14001 is about governance and control, not environmental perfection. You don't need to have solved your environmental challenges to implement the standard. You need to have a system for managing them. This slide is directed specifically at executive leadership because the standard has clear expectations about the role of top management, and those expectations cannot be outsourced or delegated away. Executive leadership is responsible for 4 things under ISO 14001: setting the strategic direction and intent for the environmental management system, approving the scope and allocating the resources necessary, establishing the environmental policy and objectives, and reviewing performance and ensuring accountability. The note at the bottom of this slide is worth reading aloud. ISO 14001 cannot be delegated as a compliance exercise. The standard requires visible, active leadership commitment. If the executive team is not engaged, the system will not sustain. This is not an unusual requirement. It mirrors what ISO 9001 expects of top management as well. But it is worth being honest about. This standard requires your involvement, not just your signature. We're now at the decision point of the briefing. Before recommending a next step, there are 4 questions worth sitting with as a leadership team. First, are environmental expectations already affecting your customers or bids? If the answer is yes, or if you're seeing early signals, the urgency is real. Second, would delay increase your cost, risk, or disruption? Given what we covered on the risk of inaction slide, The answer for most organizations is yes. Third, does ISO 14001 align with your strategic direction and values? For most organizations in regulated, contracted, or ESG exposed markets, it does. And fourth, is your leadership team prepared to sponsor a structured approach? The framing on this slide is intentional. For many organizations, the question is when, not if. The decision before you today is really about whether you want to implement on your timeline or someone else's. So, what does implementation actually look like? This slide gives you a clear picture of the typical path from decision to registration. The full timeline is approximately 5 to 6 months, organized into 5 phases followed by ongoing activities. Phase 1 is the kickoff and environmental aspect identification, roughly 3 weeks. This is where scope is confirmed, your organization's environmental aspects are identified, and applicable legal and regulatory obligations are established. This is the strategic foundation phase. Phase 2 is documentation development, approximately 6 weeks. Your environmental management system manual, procedures, and supporting documented information are developed. This is the critical path. If document review and approval gets delayed, it impacts the entire schedule. Phase 3 is training and implementation, 4 to 6 weeks. Staff receive ISO overview training, and the system is put into practice across affected functions. Phase 4 covers internal audits and management review, 2 to 4 weeks. Your internal audit program is completed and management reviews the system's performance for the first time. Phase 5 is the audit process, approximately 5 to 6 weeks total, including the scope audit 30 days prior, and then the 3 to 5 day registration audit, conducted by an accredited third-party certification body. Once registered, ongoing activities include annual surveillance audits and continual improvement. The system is designed to sustain and grow over time. One important note: organizations already certified to ISO 9001 typically complete this path at the lower end of the range because the infrastructure and culture are already in place. This slide provides a visual version of that same roadmap, showing the flow of milestones from kickoff through to registration and into ongoing compliance activities. You can reference this as a planning tool when discussing timing with your team, which brings us to the proposed next step. We are not recommending a gap assessment. In our experience, gap assessments tend to produce a task list and a task list approach to ISO 14001 leads to a system that is built around checking boxes rather than around your organization's actual strategy and operations. That produces a brittle system that is harder to sustain. Instead, we recommend beginning with an EMS strategic planning session. This is a facilitated engagement designed to build your environmental management strategy from the ground up, holistically, with leadership involved, and integrated into how your organization actually operates. The structure is straightforward. 1 day of preparation by MSY, reviewing your organization, your operations, and any existing systems. 1 full day on site with your leadership team to work through scope, strategic context, environmental obligations, and objectives together, and a half-day follow-up in which MSI delivers written outputs, an EMS strategic framework, implementation roadmap, and resource plan. The investment is $3,250, 2.5 days at $1,300 per day. What happens after the session? Your leadership team has the strategic foundation in place. Implementation begins with clear direction and full organizational alignment, not a list of tasks assigned to whoever happens to be available. The final slide brings this together. For organizations with ISO 9001 certification, ESG exposure, or growth into regulated or international markets. Proceeding with ISO 14001 is strategically sound and increasingly expected. The recommended next step is to authorize an EMS strategic planning session, and then proceed with full implementation from a clear strategic foundation. To schedule your session or to learn more about MSI's Sure Results program and ongoing implementation support, reach out to us at msi-international.com or call 8889149141. Thank you for your time. We look forward to working with your organization.
My name is Diana Lin, and I'm the founder of Management Systems International, development of all of our solutions. For over 2 decades, MSI has helped organizations like yours build management systems that are not just certifiable, but genuinely useful to the business. If what you've heard today resonates, I'd welcome the conversation. Whether you're ready to schedule your EMS strategic planning session or simply want to talk through where your organization stands, we're easy to reach. Visit us at msi-international.com, call us at 888-9149-141, or send us an email at info@msi-international.com. You'll also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and our other social channels. At MSI, our focus is simple: rapidly multiplying our customers' value. We look forward to doing that for you.